Hi, this is my assignment 1 and I'll be talking about the assembly line. My name's Jordan and let's get started. So, I'll be talking a little bit about the theory of the assembly line and a little bit about Fordism because it closely coincides with the ideals of what an assembly line is. So, the assembly line illustrates the fundamental principles of mechanization, standardization, continuity, constraint, and the reduction of work to simple labor. In short, this meant to reduce workload while increasing output. It brought the principles of conveyance and controlled movement to a metal-based industry where the problems of standardized parts and steady power had first to be solved. Essentially, Henry Ford was responsible for the mass production of standard parts, which led to the mass production of interchangeable parts in the future. So Henry Ford believed in these three main principles and used it as a sound business model. The first being the standardization of the product. Nothing handmade, everything is made through machines and molds by unskilled workers. The employment of assembly lines which use special purpose tools and/or equipment to allow unskilled workers to contribute to the finished product. And lastly, workers are paid higher living wages, so they can afford to purchase the products they make. This last point is very important, and that's a mental note to keep it in mind. So lastly, here are some points, some further points to what the Fordism and the assembly line really entailed. So workers do not lift heavy. There's no stooping or bending. No special training required. There are jobs that almost anyone can do and provide employment to immigrants. So now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the assembly line itself. So Henry Ford first introduced the assembly line in Detroit, where people across the country came looking for work. This economic boom where people had jobs they could support themselves on welcomed in a new societal change. Reduced costs by using standardized parts, which led to a very effective method of assembly. And lastly, now almost everything is made on assembly lines. So now I'll be talking to you about the interchangeability of the assembly lines. So the vast majority of major companies involved in distribution of goods use assembly lines, sorry. And interchangeability is a direct result of the Ford assembly line. So now the question is an assembly line a good or a bad thing? So business ethics comes into play here. And the assembly line is a great tool to use, but it can be misused and abused in a lot of different situations. At the same time, by being unethical, it brings means of living to our society. So is there a moral fight where individuals may argue that they are giving the greatest amount of joy to the most amount of people? However, here is an example of assembly line work where workers in China are making portable products such as the iPad and iTouches and so on. There is a link at the end of the presentation to read more about the situation. But to put it in perspective, these workers are getting paid $1.12 per hour to produce iPhones and iPads for the West. Now, moving on to the next slide, we move back to the theory of the assembly line and Fordism, only to realize the first two principles are being implemented, however, the third is being waved off. And why is that? To maximize profits. So, not everything is bad, and yeah, so apart from the bad, there's a lot of good assembly lines have there's a lot of good assembly lines have given us, such as the mass production of pretty much everything from cars to cookies. Included is a link I'll put in the description, but it's a link on how Pringles are made. I just thought this was pretty interesting to see how machines have almost exclusively taken away the jobs of all the potential assembly line workers, and they sort of replace them in the workforce, causing a loss of jobs. So, in conclusion, the assembly line contributed to society in a great and immense way. If it hadn't been for the Ford assembly line, we may have never experienced standardization leading to mass production of goods that we see today. To conclude, the assembly line was a huge part of our history and has shaped our society in modern times, creating a foundation and principles to be greatly successful in commerce.